do the video without too much trouble. Okay, and you'll have to
Okay,
accept
yeah,
that.
just let me know that it's being live streamed. So it just asked me for my consent. So of course I hit
Yeah,
okay.
awesome. Okay, so welcome. Hooray.
Hi. I'm so glad you have me on here. I'm excited to
Yes,
do this. I was really ecstatic when you asked me. I was like, oh wow,
I
this
know.
could be a really cool opportunity. So
It's
I'm
wonderful.
really
And
glad.
I've been like just paying attention to you just a little and being like, I want to see what's up with Liz. So
I appreciate that.
obviously something interesting is going on.
Mhm.
So, how about we just start with you just saying like, what is your life like now? What's going on for you? Just a little bit about that.
Um, my life is really an adventure right now. There's a lot of craziness that's happened like over the past year. Um, the year prior to last year, I was living in a different state and everything, and I completely uprooted my entire life to come here where I'm at now. So it's definitely been an adventure, and it was a really like I literally took a leap of faith because the way I used to live was very like in a box, with a lot of
Mhm.
people around me, influencing and controlling my life. And finally, I just got tired of it. And I was like, I'm done with all this. I left, and a couple people thought I was completely out of my mind, but I did what was best for me. So,
It's wonderful. And
mhm.
what was the push or the pull? What was the carrot or the stick that had you move besides the people who being
um,
in the box?
I was really stuck. By the time I left everything, it had just gotten to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. Um, Also, I was, deciding to be in a new relationship and leave my old one, and a lot of people didn't know about it. I kind of kept it a secret. So I kind of blew everybody's minds when I suddenly just made the decision to do this. They were like, "Are you having some kind of existential crisis? What's going on with you?" So yeah,
So what if I am? Very cool. So enough of
yeah,
this. It was a whole lot of enough of this. And I'm
yeah,
starting this new relationship and we're going to another state and have fun
hmm
with your lives because I'm gone.
yeah.
Very cool. And what was it like? Like what was the box like that you left? Like what did it look like?
Um, it was very before I had left, I had been involved in well, now it's an evangelist church. It used to be a non-denominational church. Um, and that kind of for like a year prior to that had kind of become my whole life because I was just really trying to look for answers and truth, and I they kept telling me over and over again that they could give me all the answers. So I trusted in them, and unfortunately I got swept in the whole evangelist right-wing movement very rapidly. So yeah, that kind of took over my whole life. Um and it was a lot of other things too. It just I've been living in the same state for 14 years. So after so long, you kind of just, um, I don't know if the word I'm looking for is settle. You
Settle.
just begin to settle, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is my life.
This is it.
Yeah, and I'd been
Yeah.
in a 4-year relationship, with someone, and after a couple years, that started to really kind of grow really stagnant too. I wasn't really growing anymore. I was just kind of stuck.
Hmm.
So that was a view into like what my box kind of looked like, and
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety and fear kind of held me back from breaking out of the box for a long time. So
Yeah. It's
it
awesome.
was, mhm,
And hard, really hard.
Yeah, it was hard. There
Yeah.
wasn't really many people I could talk to about how I was feeling, people who I used to go to church with, I would try to tell them, when I felt like that I wasn't really in agreement with with everything that they believed anymore. I was really struggling to still go every week and pretend, and that got really hard too. So,
Mhm.
it just got really, everything just became really stagnant and just kind of stuck and kind of lifeless. Really, I kind of felt like I was just going through the motions of every day, just trying to get through it.
Mhm. I just so admire that you're just willing to do something new. Most people just stay
Hmm.
there. Oh, well, I'll just
Yeah,
die like
and
this.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
When the fear keeps you back from, doing what you really want to. And I feel like a lot of people just, they're just like, they just accept it. They're just like, okay, well, I'm too, fearful to do what I really want to with my life. So then they just don't. And that's really sad to me
Yeah.
that people just live inside this little box and they
Yeah.
never go outside of it. Like since I've left, some of the people who I used to talk to, who used to be friends, well, none of them have reached out to me since then, and it's been well over a year. So their whole like "we love you and care about you" was not the case,
Yeah.
and that's hard to come to terms with. And sometimes I wonder about them. Like I wonder who they would be if they could break out of their little boxes and really live their lives.
Yeah.
It crosses my
Yeah.
mind a lot sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And what now you broke out of your box? What's your life like now, inside outside?
It's completely different. Like for the past year, I've been doing a lot of moving around, still trying to like find stable housing. That's been a challenge. So we've just me and my boyfriend have been moving around like place to place. So that's when I say it's been like an adventure. Like every couple of months, we're on to whatever the next adventure is. Because I try to look at the situation from the most positive aspects of it. Like as long as he and I are together, as long as we have each other, we can make it through anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my way of looking at it. But it's definitely like I definitely just feel free. I didn't before. Like I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm living my life to the fullest. And I just turned 32 a month ago. So I'm like, wow, it took me this long to, you know, get there.
Yeah. And what's it like? So that's the outside, you're moving around, you're still happy in this relationship, it's helping
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
What's it like on the inside? What's going on for you inside?
On the inside, I feel like it's everything that I'm still going through is it's growing me every single day. Like I said before, I didn't feel like I was growing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like everything I go to now, there's always a what's the word I'm trying to say? There's always growth to everything. Like every day is a new day, a new sorry. I'm not always good with my words. Sometimes I start going
You're
on a
fine.
tangent. Um but yeah, every day it's a new experience. And it's the first time I really looked at life that way. It just doesn't feel like the same thing every day. It's always like, what's today going to be like? So it's definitely a new perspective. It's very enriching spiritually, and especially spiritually. I feel like I'm closer now, to my spirituality than I was, just a year or two ago. Um, and sometimes I say things online that make people angry. It's just that people come onto my Facebook and they start saying ridiculous things to me because they're like, "Oh, I see you consider yourself to be a witch and a Christ follower. Or how does that make sense?" And I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I feel like explaining this to people. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So is that new? Or were you holding those two
Oh,
identities before?
I was definitely like when I started um knowing that I didn't want to be like in the institutional church anymore. I started gravitating towards those things very quickly. And of course, because nobody would understand, I kept it to myself. I guess you could say I was kind of in the broom closet, so to speak, because I didn't know how to tell people, my ex wasn't the most understanding person. So when I first tried to tell him, I was met with a lot of scrutiny and judgment. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm just not going to tell anybody then. It's not
Right.
like they'll understand. So I was really just kind of secretive about it.
Yeah.
But now I just put it out there, like on my social media and stuff. Like, I'm just like, this is who I am.
Right.
Hopefully people will accept me for that. And
Hmm.
if they don't, then, I mean,
Yeah.
what else can you do?
Yeah. Have you found great people to connect to in real life with your
Um,
lived
it's kind
spirituality?
of been since I've been up here in New England, I haven't really had like the biggest opportunity to meet people. We've been moving around so much, so we do meet a lot of different people, but it's usually like the interactions can be like kind of limited. It's usually just very like casual conversation and things like that. So, um, no, I haven't really had that opportunity yet. I would definitely say my boyfriend is like my biggest, like, we're most like-minded with each other, in our companionship and our relationships. So, like, we're most like each other. So he's like my biggest supporter and my rock. It would
Hmm.
be nice to meet other people,
Yeah.
who, but I just haven't had that opportunity yet.
Hmm.
But hopefully in the future, definitely.
Yeah. And what about online? Because you're not that unusual, honestly. There's plenty of people
Hmm.
holding
Hmm.
something like you're doing. Have
Yeah.
you found people to play with online?
Yes, I actually have found a few people I've talked to, and we've had some conversations, and we've been really wonderful to each other. I'm like, oh, I was like, I don't really like know this person, but we definitely have something in common. There's definitely some safe places I've found, like even on Facebook, where I can talk to people, and they even like the admins will even say things like, this is a safe space, for all of us. So if you need to talk about something, we're here. You can
Nice.
put it on here, and you won't be met with hatred or judgment or scrutiny, because we don't allow that here. So yeah, there's definitely been a couple online communities where I felt very welcome and met some really nice people. So
That's wonderful.
hmm
Yeah. So some people come out of Christianity and do all kinds of things,
yeah.
become anti-Christian or whatever, and go on
hmm
to something else. And you are, I don't know, you don't seem anti. You're
No,
not anti.
no.
So how is that working for you? Like, why aren't you anti? And what is still drawing you around is it the Jesus thing? What is it that still draws you?
Well, I definitely have always, like, even when I was an evangelist, there were definitely parts of the Jesus story that were very touching to me. They definitely, like, I felt that on a deeper level. And as I started to come out of, you know, uh, Christianity, like, I was like, well, maybe there's this perspective on God that isn't like what I was taught, growing up and in church, that God is actually very loving and not hateful. And that really started to resonate with me, because I felt like I know of other people who I've talked to who've completely like have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, as they like to
Yeah.
say, and they're just like, I'm done with all of it. But that's not me, because I've had too many experiences, and my faith is very important to me. It still is, even though it's definitely evolved. you
Yes.
know Even when I was an evangelist, like, I really struggled with a lot of the things that they would tell us, like on Sundays, like how the preacher would come up and tell us how, like, God loves us, but then say really awful things about certain people, and that would just confuse me. I would be like,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. You just contradicted yourself. And it never
I
sat
do.
right with me. And I would sit there and I was like, what's wrong with this picture? You know? So, because it was really jarring to me when I first joined that church and I was looking for answers and I was telling people about this divine experience I had, a couple years ago. And well, then they were, and all the only answers they could give to me were, oh, we'll just come to church every Sunday, read your Bible. And then it was all these rules, that,
Right.
and it was suddenly really overwhelming. I was like, wait a minute, what's all this now? So,
Uh-huh.
and I struggled with that for a while too, like the whole time I was there. And I was the person that would sometimes try to ask questions, and they didn't like that when you start asking hard questions.
Yeah.
They would just tell me to just pray on it and have faith, or maybe you're not praying enough. It felt it was kind of the whole thing of like, whatever you do, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
There were a lot of times that I would leave like a Sunday service, and afterwards I would just feel like a pile of human piss, as I like to say. I would just feel terrible about myself because that's how like the sermons and things like that were resonating with me. And I remember always thinking like, God can't really be this way, can he? Like, I was like, this, and I would ask myself that a lot. And then of course you try to ask those questions, and you know, they would say things like, oh, well, I remember one time I went over to a former friend of mine's house for the afternoon, and I just tried to confide in her, and that was kind of having a crisis of faith, or I was starting to deconstruct, and I tried talking to her about it, and I got to the end of telling her how I was feeling, and she was like, well, you're thinking for yourself, and we think that's really dangerous. And my red flag went up right there, and she said it, and I sat there and thought to myself, like, I think I'm in a damn cult.
How'd this happen?
That's where my mind went as soon as she said it. I didn't say that to her, but I just kind of looked at her like, what? And then she insisted on getting me baptized and this and that and the other thing. Like that day, she's like, oh, I need to help you today. You're so lost. And I'm like, why? Why do you think I'm so lost? I'm like, because I'm asking questions. And then she just kept going around with it's Satan influencing you and this, that, and
Oh
that's the only
gosh.
thing she could say. And the conversation kind of went nowhere. So I was really frustrated by the end of it. That was the last time I ever went to her house. I never went
Yeah.
back over there again.
Right.
But that was just really crushing to me, like to confide in someone and to think, to hope that they would have my well-being in mind, and then to tell them all that, and then for them to say that.
Yeah.
It's just, it's really, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's really disheartening
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So that was kind of like the first time I tried to get out of the church. I kind of tried deconstructing at first, and then I got kind of pulled back in, and then the brainwashing and everything was more intense. And then actually it was my boyfriend, believe it or not, that helped me to leave the church. He was the first one who like woke me up to how indoctrinated I was, because I couldn't see it for myself. And we had a conversation a couple months into when we had just started talking, and he just straight up told me, he was like, I'm really worried about you because you're into all this dogmatic religion, and he's like, I wish you could see, just how deep into it you are. And I couldn't
Right.
at first.
Yes.
And once I finally did, I definitely had like that cognitive dissonance where I feel like my whole world kind of came crashing down, because I thought I had known everything by that point, like that there
Mm-hmm.
was to know, because of I had been going to church and this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, that was really eye-opening, and it was scary.
Yes. It was Really a gift for it from a loving place to say, hey, let's, look at
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
It's very generous.
I'm really glad I had somebody to pull me out because nobody else would. They all just wanted to keep me in it. They would tell me ridiculous things like, we think you're demonically oppressed, and we think you need deliverance, and we think you need to be baptized immediately, like now, and we think you need this, that, and the other thing, And that was really like, I kind of, for a minute, kind of felt like I was losing my mind. I started kind of having a little bit of like a psychotic break because of all of it. Because I started
Mm.
thinking, like, well, what if they're right? What if this is because that's really what's happening to me?
Right, right. Um, Unfortunately, your story is pretty normal.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard this from a few other people, I've talked to, and they've told me some really just awful things they've been through. So
Yeah, I just want to validate, like, you're so not alone in this.
thank you. It's good to
Um,
know. Sometimes
so
I'm so
much.
nervous talking about this
Yeah,
stuff.
this is
You
this
know?
is this has become like just it's a very strong story. And deconstruction, what's called these deconstruction these days out of Christianity is becoming big
Yeah.
and talked about, and people have different things. So one thing I do want to say is that a paradigm that you said makes a lot of sense. It was mine too, and I've seen it a lot. This whole, you had some kind of big divine experience,
Hmm.
and then you're like, you kind of you bought the package. It's just like, okay, how do I
Yep.
understand this? And they're like,
Yep.
we can make you understand this, and then here,
Hmm.
like, believe all this
Hmm.
stuff. So that's my, it's a paradigm I see. And so I'd love to hear about, if you want to share your divine experience, and then how you slipped into the church about it.
So it was like it's like January of 2020. I was in my own apartment the one night, like just by myself. And earlier in the day, me and my ex had a conversation about religion. Um, he swears to this day to take credit for this. So like that night, I like just started talking to God, and I remember I was really angry and depressed, and I was feeling kind of lost. And so I started doing the whole like prayer thing,
Right.
and things that something actually did actually happen. Like I was in my bedroom, and I remember I was laying there, and all of a sudden, like I'm not even joking, I saw this with my own two eyes, like a bright light just came into my bedroom, and it just enveloped me, and all I felt was love and understanding. And you know for the first time ever, I never experienced anything like that in my entire life, that to that point.
Yeah.
And it was really mind-blowing, but I knew it was a divine experience because I can't describe it as anything else. It was
Yeah.
truly supernatural, you
Yes.
know? And so what I took it as, from my very like limited understanding and growing up going to like vacation Bible school and things like that, I was like, oh, this was a born again experience. I guess it's real.
Mm.
So then I started looking around for churches, and I came across this one that I had gone to before for food pantries and such. So I think they had kind of been eyeballing me, like when I used to come for like food giveaways and things like that. And the pastor used to look at me sometimes. Sometimes he'd be preaching, and they'd start looking at me. And it would make me really uncomfortable. And so I think they kind of had me in mind. So once I started expressing interest, and they were like, "Oh, you know," because they were waiting for it, because supposedly they had been hoping and praying that I would just walk in one day and be like, okay, I'm ready to do this. So I don't know if that means that they were like targeting me for a while, or like, and because they knew I was like very vulnerable and had gone through a lot of hard things, because that's kind of what they do. They do prey on people who are down and out in their lives and have been through a lot. So I started to go there, and they just kind of, because I had had a legit encounter with God and source, and when I started going there, I was just so desperate to find the same God that I encountered that night in that church. So of course they were like, "Oh yeah, we have all the answers," and I just believed it. And because I was so like searching for the divine, like anywhere, I got roped in to their whole sales pitch very quickly. And I remember a couple years before that telling myself that I would never fall for that sales pitch, but I did anyway.
Yeah.
Because they knew I was vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they knew, they'd taken my beautiful experience with, a creator and turned it into something, maligned and twisted and all these rules. And,
Mhm. Yeah. So how did you grow up? Did you have any spiritual or religion previous?
as a kid, I really, like, my parents would never talk about it. My mom used to say things like, "We don't believe in anything in this house," but she would go back and forth. Because she had a lot of issues. So, with her mental health and drug and substance abuse and alcohol abuse. So every few years she'd switch up. Like, she'd sometimes say she didn't believe in anything, and then she'd start going to church and saying she believed in something, and she would just flop back and forth.
Yeah.
Um, and my dad, not really, he kind of spent his whole life not really believing in much of anything. So I didn't really have spiritual parents, but some of the people around us, there was a couple that my mom and dad were friends with, and they were very religious. So they started encouraging me to go to vacation Bible school when I was a kid. And sometimes
Mhm.
they'd even so that's how I started getting my first experience, like, with churches.
Yeah.
And even as a kid, it felt weird to me, the whole thing about going in. And I still remember the one time I was in a class during the vacation Bible school, and this one of the teachers came up to me, and she scared me just by saying, she's like, "And who do you want Jesus to save?" And I remember I just looked at her like a deer in the headlights, and I was like, I couldn't answer her question. It just freaked me out. Um,
Mm.
but I kind of even had weird vibes about it as a kid. Like, the whole thing just felt strange. And then as a teenager, I was living with my sister when I was like 16, 17 years old, and she started making me go to after school um, Bible programs like Awana at a Baptist church because she thought it would be good for me. And of course, I hated it because I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
A lot of the kids were not nice to me. Even the youth pastor one time singled me out and pretty much humiliated me in front of the whole youth group, and pretty
Mm.
much did a whole spiel about me.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so yeah, because I was wearing a t-shirt with skulls on it, and he started talking about kids like me, and he's like, "You Goths don't believe in anything." And he looked directly at me and humiliated me, and all the kids were staring at me, and it was really embarrassing.
Mm.
I remember I just wanted to crawl under the table and like hide the rest of the night. And I remember feeling like, I don't belong here. They don't want me here.
Right.
I'm not supposed to be here. So, like, from that time on through like early teens and 20s, I built up a lot of anger and resentment inside myself for anything that had to do with God and church and all that. So I was very bitter about it. I remember sometimes people would try to talk to me about it, and I was like, no, I don't. I was like, no, I'm not having this conversation. Um, and the last relationship I was in, my ex is a is a Republican Trump supporter, and he's very Christian. So you know, he kept trying for a couple years to get me to, you know, to get me on the right track or whatever it was,
Uh-huh.
you know. So it was, yeah, it's really like I never really had like consistent what am I trying to say, religious practice like growing up and as a teenager. Like I didn't really get swept into it until I was like 29 years old, and I would think by then that I would be able to not drink the Kool-Aid and see through, you know, bullshit. But unfortunately, I got kind of caught up in it myself, you know.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is
you
kind
had
of
this amazing
scary when you think of
experience.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's like, let's get on this train. How do I stay on this train?
Hmm. Hmm.
Not that way. Sorry, I
Like I
interrupted you.
still
Go ahead.
sometimes I still look at back at it and I'm like, I still can't believe they got me. They actually had me for a time. Like it's kind of scary to me how that kind of indoctrination, you know, works.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you started to separate from all that,
Hmm.
and before, like, have you continued to have like direct experience? Have you had other like internal visions and or whatever?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, it's really hard to describe, but I feel like I have a closer relationship with God than I ever did before. Um,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to go into detail about that. Because I'm trying to make it uh let's see. Hold on, I'm tripping over my words again. Um, I don't know, it's really hard to describe, but it's definitely I could have never like it's more than I ever would have dreamed of, honestly. Um, like years ago, I would never have thought that I would, you know, be so close, you know, to you know the spiritual side of myself. Um, I didn't even know years ago that I, you know, what I was capable of. And trying to think what I want to say. um, but you know what I mean? It's just it's very it's you know, I just could have never like years ago if anybody had told me now, you know, what it would be like, I would have just broke them off and been like, no way. You know?
Hmm.
So but I don't need a church. I don't need like a church building for that. I
Right.
don't need any I don't feel like I have to go sit in a pew, you know, every Sunday for 30 to 45 minutes and listen to somebody tell me how I should be experiencing God, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, because you're already dialed in.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And does this just happen as a normal, like whatever, break into your life, or do you have any practices or meditation, or do you do anything to invite this?
Well, I feel like I always invited in just by, you know, just everyday life. Um, it's interesting. I go out in nature and I just see the presence of God everywhere and everything, you know, every aspect of nature and just other people and just life in general. Um, you know, I also do sometimes I astral project in my sleep, but I haven't done that in a minute. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I feel like every waking moment is a moment with God, like everything. So that's how I look at it now.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so when you were transitioning from Christian in church, you
Hmm.
were really called, like, there's a lot of variety um in which things.
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
words, there's a lot of variety. So, like, did you just trip into something, or tell me about that?
Can you elaborate? Like,
Yeah, well,
I'm trying to
so you
understand the question.
identify as a witch, and like, what does
Yes.
that mean? And what is like, do you like what like lineage?
Hmm.
What is the ideas and practice that are feeding
Hmm.
you?
Well, I just recently came across a little bit more of like my like family history and the area where I'm from. And apparently there's a lot of history about witches in with the Pennsylvania Dutch. And those are my
Oh, really?
ancestors. So that was pretty amazing to find out recently. I didn't know about that. Um, no one in my family really ever told me about, our lineage and things like that. It seems like they were always kind of secretive about it,
Hmm.
and I don't know why. Um, my great grandmother, I believe, was a witch because she was a seer. Um, and of course, my Pennsylvania Dutch ancestry, so it's literally like in my blood. So all this I didn't know until recently. But also kind of for years, I always suspected that I was different. And, you know, in that way, and not being able to figure it out until I was much older because I didn't really understand. So, I feel like being a witch is, the definition for me, it's being a teacher and a healer. And I have found that I do have healing capabilities. I've been around people who have told me they're like, "Whoa, you like I was around you and like I instantly, feel better." One time I actually did when I was still in the church, I went to a deliverance movement because my church friend asked me to go and thought it would be good. So it's supposed to be
Hmm.
based on the book of Acts. So I was like, okay. And that night they brought me up. I got called up to the front of the room, and there was a man who needed healing. And they would put my hands on him, and after a couple minutes, he went back to his seat, and then he told my friend to tell me that it actually worked. He said, "I feel a lot better." He was like, he's like, "Don't tell this to everybody, but just keep it between us." But I feel like she's got some serious gift of healing, because there was a lot of other crazy things that happened that night at that event that I don't know if it was like an act.
Oh.
But at least I was able to do that for that one person. So,
So it's interesting. I'm just curious about the culture. So on one hand, the culture is doing this healing and deliverance act, and on the
mhm.
other hand, you're putting hands on someone and they're actually healed, and
Yeah, and that was like mind blowing
that's
to me because I didn't think I could. I didn't know I could do it or I was capable of. But he came up to me and he's like, "You really did something." He's like, "Don't tell anybody else
yeah.
here."
But
But
why don't tell anybody? Because it seems
mhm.
like what I just wonder, like that's just a
Yeah,
nonsense.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah. I
doesn't make
have. I've
sense.
wondered about that too. But I mean, that was like one instance. But I think it's more so about like when I'm around people. Because I'm an empath, so I absorb a lot of people's energies, like their moods and things can like throw me off. Um, I think I also just, as far as the healing goes, like when I find when people are around me and they always tell me I have a very good vibe about me. They're like, "Wow, I talked to you and hung around you and my whole day is better." They're like, "You just light up a room." I've had several people tell me like you have this light inside of you. It's like a beacon. Um, so I feel like that's definitely part of it too. Because in the past I've had people who don't know me at all, complete strangers, and suddenly they come up to me and they start telling me their whole life story within a span of like 5 minutes, and I'm like, why is this person confiding in me?
Right.
And then they'll say to me like, "I really like you. I feel very comfortable around you." They were
Mhm.
like, "I don't like know you personally, but you seem like somebody I could trust in." And I'm just like really like, whoa. you know?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, here's an interesting question to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
it's like everything you're saying, there's the empath word, there's the witch word, but otherwise everything you're saying, it in my opinion fits right into Christianity as well as
Yeah.
other places, because spirit moves,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because we have spiritual senses, we have spiritual abilities, we have,
Mhm.
spirit is real and moves and does shit in the world,
Mhm.
and we get to be involved. So like, so it manifests in witches, and it manifests in Christians, and it manifests in all over the place from my perspective,
Mhm. Yeah.
but so I just find it fascinating that, like, you're saying, like, you left Christianity to do
Yeah.
all these things that are Christian
Yeah,
in
I
my
know.
world.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I guess I don't like to use the term Christian because there's so much
Oh, it's wild. Yeah.
negativity and
Hmm.
bullshit associated with that word. So like I try to
Yeah.
veer
Okay, but
away
that's what
from
you
it.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. Because in my world, we call it psychic.
Mhm.
We call it psychic,
Yeah.
which is soul, and the soul
Mhm.
senses and the soul abilities, right? So that you're saying which, like I say psychic, like some people say
Mhm.
mystic.
Yeah.
I say
Yeah.
mystic, right? It's all the same shit.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay. So, anything else you want to say about that? That okay, you know, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And that fits just well. So it makes sense to me that you're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You're like,
Mhm.
I love this God thing. I love this
Mhm.
divine experience. And
Mhm.
what you're saying to me is that you're a light in the world, like Jesus talked about, and that you're
Mhm.
experiencing the fruit of the spirit, like Paul
Mhm.
talked about, and you're experiencing the gifts of the spirit, like Paul talked about, and so like that's all just real, and you're in
Yeah.
flow as a mystic.
Mhm.
And that's really cool. So anything else you want to say about that?
Well, what else do you want to know? I
Well,
mean,
I do
it's
have
here to
another
tell you.
question, but
Yeah.
I just like, so that's come to an end. So you
Okay.
said that the youth pastor was calling you a goth. Do you
Yeah.
identify as a goth?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay, and what does that
Yes, I
mean?
do. It's really first. It's originally it was a subculture. It was a music subculture in the '60s and '70s. It started with like really gloomy, dark music. Um, really like synth-driven bands like The Cure and Joy Division, and over time, it's become like a whole like lifestyle. Um, and it's really centered. The whole aesthetic of it is very like dark and dramatic and um macabre. That's the best way I can describe it. But it really is like a whole subculture
Yeah.
in itself. And I've identified as goth since I was like 16 years old. I've probably been goth my whole life though. I just didn't know what it was when I was younger because I've always liked spooky and dark things. Have always interested me since I was a kid. Um, I just didn't start looking that way and expressing myself that way until I was like 16. So, and when that pastor said that to me, I felt like that was a really close-minded mentality to have about it because I was like, well, no, I wanted to say like, no, you're wrong because there are goths who believe in all kinds of different things. There are
Right.
alternative people who believe in all kinds of different things. You can't just blanket statement us and say we're all non-believers. Like
Right.
it's not right. But I didn't have the
Right.
guts to say that.
Right, right. So it's a subculture, but it's not a religion, and there's different religions
No,
and
it's not a religion. It
spiritualities
is
and
a
ways of being.
subculture though.
Yeah.
It's a whole
Hmm.
lifestyle for some people. For some people it's a weekend thing. For some people it's just music. For some people it's just fashion. For some people it's just like the literature and the art. It's different for everyone.
Hmm. Yeah. And so those are your people, and that's your shit. Like, you like it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's your vibe.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's interesting because it kind of points out something that I believe. It's like we have our human parts and our human emotions, our human beliefs and our human ways of being, and then we
Mhm.
have like, and then there's the light and the love that's just like in and through and around us. And
Mhm.
so you, like many goths, are full of light and you're shining,
Yeah.
right? So there's like this dark, heavy thing going on, and then the light is just like, so it's
Yeah.
like the spiritual light and the physical, like, oh,
Yeah.
it's the
It
two
throws
things
people off
together.
a lot. They meet me and they're like, "Whoa, you are way different than I thought you'd be." And I was like, "Did you assume that I was mean or
Right,
scary because I dress in black and I have a lot of tattoos and I look kind of
right.
intimidating at first glance?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "You can't judge a book by its cover."
You really can't.
Um,
I'm just gonna interject, is it okay? I lived in
mhm,
Seattle for 16 years, and like it's maybe it's changing now, but when I was there, it was like it was so cool because people would come down the street being like so
yeah.
scary looking, and then say hi, and they're like the nicest people in the world, like over and
Mhm,
over and over and over.
mhm.
Particularly, I found there, I don't know why. Whereas like, where I grew up, like by New York City, out in the suburbs, but by New York City, it's like if they look scary, you might want to believe it.
Yeah,
Like they could be great, but you might want to
yeah.
believe it.
Yeah,
So
I lived in New York State for a long time, and I remember even just walking down the street just on a regular day. I was going to the store or whatever I was doing, and people, when they would see me, they would stare at me a lot. Some of them would cross the street when I walked near them because they were afraid of
mm,
me. Um,
yeah.
Sometimes people would yell things out of their cars at me, just, I've had
Yeah.
people that used to come up to me and they were like, "Why do you look so scary?" And I remember I would just laugh because I didn't know
Well,
how else
it's
to
just their
react.
perspective, right? It's not like
Yeah,
you're not meaning to look scary, are you?
no, I mean, no, not at all. I'm just expressing myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it always throws people off when they're like, "Wow, you're really nice." And I was like, "Did you think I was not gonna be nice?"
Yeah. You're clearly so sweet. So
Oh,
sweet.
thank you.
Like I knew that, like when I contacted you, I'm like, this woman is so sweet.
Oh, thank you
Um,
so much.
yeah, I mean, it just comes out of you. It's so clear. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I really love it. So I feel like I'm getting to know you better. I'm so glad. Um, is there anything on your ideas of like what you wanted to share or what you would like to share with other mystics, other people who are
Hmm,
in the divine journey?
Well, I'd say that one thing I like to say a lot is that everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is unique. So, I feel like we don't all hit like the same milestones, if that's what you want to call them, all at the same time because it's
Yeah.
different for everyone. So if someone's really struggling or is not sure, I think the best advice I can give to them is one day at a time. You know, take a breath, be kind to yourself, forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like those are the best things you can do. Because it's a day at a time for all of us. So I feel like that's the best advice I can give.
It's
Um,
fantastic.
for anyone who's really struggling, because I've had to learn that myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it so works, right?
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
beautiful. Yeah. Great. So, what do you see? I mean, if you look forward, are there things that you're excited to do, to be, or you're just like, let's just take a day at a time? Is there some?
I like to take things one day at a time.
Mhm.
I've always had that perspective. Um, I don't like to plan like super long term because I've never really felt that way. It's not that I can't see the future. I'm just kind of more like a one step at a time kind of person where I'm like, okay, let's just take things one day at a time. That way, if something's like stressful or whatever, I'm just like, just breathe, cross that bridge when you get to it. You'll figure it
Mhm.
out. Don't stress yourself all out. It'll be all right.
It's really
So that's how
great.
I look at it.
That's wonderful. And have there been any resources that have helped you along the way? Books or movies or writing
Oh
or
yeah.
rituals? What
Um,
has helped?
Believe it or not, the show that I'm wearing a t-shirt of, Supernatural, that show played a really big part in helping me deconstruct, believe it or not. I don't know if that sounds weird because it's a TV show, but there's a lot of like stuff they delve into, a lot of like Judeo-Christian mythology that they go into, and for some reason, like the character, the message of like team free will and like, you know, you can write your own story was like really helpful to me when
Yes.
I started to deconstruct.
Yeah. It just really helps to see other people in the
Hmm.
conversation and
Hmm.
to be like, I'm not alone. They're different or whatever, but like at least
Yeah.
they're dealing with something similar and
Hmm.
showing me some kind of modeling.
Yeah.
It really helps. Yeah. Yeah. For myself, I'm remembering I mean, I went through deconstruction that went on forever, but I really love The Mists of Avalon. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. It's like really fat. Um,
Hmm.
it's
I might have heard of it. Sounds
it's the
slightly familiar.
Arthur legend from a female point of view.
Oh,
And I
nice.
was dealing a lot with the female face of the divine
Hmm.
and dealing with a lot of um ugh, so among like one of my many things. So anyway, I can relate. It's just helpful to just be in a conversation and see the energies go back and forth and be
Hmm.
like, all right, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Not completely crazy.
Not completely crazy.
Awesome. Okay. Anything final? I mean, you've just been
Um,
lovely and
it
real. I
was
appreciate it.
wonderful to talk to you today. I'm like giving myself props right now because I'm like, huh, I think I did pretty good. You know, I was nervous. Um, when I used
Great.
to do Zoom chats before, it was like with like 5 other people. So I was always the quiet person who would sit there and not like say anything, you know. I was like, let them
Mhm.
talk, let them
Yep.
socialize. I'll just be the weirdo, you know, in the bottom of the
Yes.
screen. It doesn't say anything until I'm asked. So, but
Yeah.
no, this has been really awesome, and I'm really glad I got to talk to you.
Oh, me
And
too.
we had this
You're
conversation.
very generous. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just such a wonderful thing for you to be real, and I'm just so
Hmm.
grateful to give you your minute, few minutes, almost an hour in this on the stage and the spotlight,
Hmm.
and be like, you matter, and your unique journey is
Hmm.
inspiring, and
Thank you.
also, you're so not alone. I just want to encourage you about that. But
Hmm.
I think there's maybe some people who might watch and want to be in touch. So are there how, if would you like people to be in touch like on Facebook or anything?
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
is there any way else besides that you would like?
I also have an Instagram. And that's tattooed Liz. So that's my Instagram.
Okay.
I don't have a YouTube yet. Still kind of working on what I want to do for that. I might start a YouTube channel. I've been thinking about it. Still, that's kind of all in like the process is up here still yet. So
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
thank you, Wendy,
Take
for
care.
having me.
Very
Thanks.
grateful.